Welcome to the Sermon Prep Podcast. I'm Dan Metzger, and I'm so glad you're joining us again today. We are continuing to kind of walk through this Lenten series that we're doing on the upper room here at St. Mark's. And today we're going to be talking about this character in the Bible that most of us tend to not want to focus on. Most of us decide that he is a side character who serves a necessary literary purpose, but other than that, we don't really want to think about him. And that's Judas Iscariot. Judas is one of the 12 disciples, and if we're honest, he's just one that really kind of confuses us. We're not really sure what to do with this guy, because how can you spend 3 years walking with the Son of God, walking with Jesus through his ministry, serving with him, healing with him, being sent out by him to do incredible things? How can you be that close to Jesus and still betray him, still turn your back on him and go a different direction? So we're going to be talking a little bit about him. This is some of the stuff that's going to be hitting the cutting room floor, stuff that I'm not really sure where it exactly fits in a sermon, but we might mention some of it. But this is just some stuff I was thinking about with Judas. It's hard to do a sermon on Judas in a lot of ways because he's just a really unlikable character. I think it's kind of funny. You look at like all of the different names that you get in the Bible, and a lot of times over history, these names have been names that parents have chosen to name their children after these different people. There's lots of Peters or Johns or Pauls or Marys out there. Not too many baby boys named Judas, are there? He is probably the greatest villain in the Bible, aside from Satan himself. It's actually interesting in Dante's Inferno, when you get to the center of hell, when you get through the 7 circles of hell, and you get to the center, you find Satan, and what he's doing is he is, for eternity, Judas is stuck in Satan's mouth, being just chewed and tormented with just his feet sticking out. It's this really weird imagery that he's just for eternity being gnawed on by Satan. He is seen as just the absolute worst. But Judas is also kind of a fascinating character for me to think about. And actually, even in the early church, I think people have always been trying to figure out, why did he do what he did? What happened with Judas? Why? How could this be? So actually, early on in the early church, there was this heresy called Gnosticism, and it's this idea that you could know, that you could have secret knowledge, and that's what saves you. That it's not grace or anything else, but that it's like this secret stuff that you could know. That would be what would put you in God's good graces. And so there was this thought, and this came in like the 2nd or 3rd century. Somebody wrote something called the Gospel of Judas. Now, this is not in your Bible, and for very good reason. It is totally off the wall, but kind of a part of the idea of it was that the story goes that Jesus pulled Judas aside at some point in the week before his death and gave him some of the secret knowledge and said, hey, this is what it's really about. These other 11, they just don't quite get it. They're not smart enough. You're the smartest one out of all of them. So let me tell you these great secrets about the universe and creation and salvation and all of these things. And it's all stuff that is pretty off the wall, and definitely not anything that you'll find in the scriptures. It kind of paints this as there being more than one God, that the God of the Old Testament is a different God, than it is a lesser God than the God of the New Testament, and all this other stuff. So this was, let's be very clear about this. This was written a couple hundred years after Jesus. It's not based in any sort of reality, and it was pretty immediately rejected by the church. But I think what people were trying to do is they were trying to figure out, well, what do we do with Judas? Like maybe this is why. Maybe this is why he did betray Jesus, because it ends with Jesus saying, like, all right, now I need you to go betray me so that all of this stuff can happen. So it's as if he was pulling Judas aside saying, hey, I need you to, this is a part of how this is all going to work. Can you go betray me now? So like that could be an explanation for why he would do something like that. Jesus told him to do it. Uh, I pretty much reject, well, not pretty much, I entirely reject that idea, that's what happened. But it's just people trying to explain it away and trying to understand. Now, there have been a ton of different ways that people have tried to understand what it is that Judas did and why he did it. Matthew's gospel seems to point towards this idea that that there was, you know, because of money, he did this, but maybe also there was something else he was trying to make happen. And then he finds himself, after he sees that Jesus is arrested, he's filled with remorse. Like, what did you think was going to happen? Well, some people have theorized that what he thought was going to happen was that um, because of his popularity, I mean, we're only a couple of days removed from Palm Sunday, when just him coming into town and coming in this victorious way, people lined the streets. They were excited to see Jesus come. That maybe this would be a thing if Jesus could be apprehended by the chief priests or by authorities of some sort, that it would cause people to rise up. It would cause this rebellion to happen. And maybe it could be the start of getting the Romans kicked out. It could be the start of restructuring what was supposed to be. The Messiah was supposed to be the one who would come and take the throne and would rule on David's throne. So maybe that's what needed to happen. And so was Judas trying to get the ball rolling with that? And then when he sees that it's not going to work and that, oh no, Jesus is actually in trouble, he becomes remorseful and he takes the money back. He throws the money back in the temple, and he goes off and ends his own life because of his regret and his remorse for what he did. That's a theory that some people have, that's why he did what he did. And there's some maybe validity to that theory. If you look at his name, Judas Iscariot, Iscariot is this kind of weird, nobody else really gets a last name. I don't know what this is about. But he's often listed with Simon the Zealot. And a zealot is someone who was actively trying to get the Romans out of power, out of Jerusalem, and was really a revolutionary kind of person. And it could be that Iscariot is a derivation of the word Sicarii, who were the daggermen. Sicarii referred to a kind of like curved blade that these daggermen carried, and they were essentially, in we would call them today, terrorists. They were essentially people who were willing to, by any violent means necessary, overthrow the Romans. So maybe there's a revolutionary attitude to him. It could also be that Iscariot refers to the town that he came from, Sicaroth, and so that could also be, it could just be an innocent thing. But that's one theory. Another theory is that he just did it for money. 30 pieces of silver as a good amount of money could have equaled like almost half a year's wages. So that's a decent amount of money. And we're told in other places in the gospel that he was stealing money from the person, that he was he was upset when he saw expensive perfume being poured out. Like that's a waste. And he was in charge of the money bag, all of these other things. Now, some of this seems to be the gospel writers after the fact. I never liked Judas. He always did this, which I'm sure if any one of the others of them had been the betrayer, they would have been able to point out things they didn't like about the others, or the errors of the others, or the ways that the others were less than perfect humans. But in any case, it does seem that Judas had a special affinity for money, and so it could be that that's why he betrayed Jesus. He just wanted the money. That's another theory, and some of the gospels seem to point to that. That's what the gospel writers seem to point to. There have been people today who have wondered if Judas might have been in some way mentally unstable. Some of the things he seemed to do, a little bit off the wall. And why would you say that? And his mood swings seem to be pretty great. So were there some mental illnesses that were involved and eventually led him to take his own life? That's a theory that some people have come up with. Others have said, no, it even says in the scripture, he was possessed by the devil. The devil made me do it. But that brings up some questions about free will. And did Jesus allow Satan to enter Judas just so that this thing could happen, so that this plan could be carried out? There's so many different ways that people have tried to understand this and explain this away. How could it be that somebody who was this close to Jesus would betray him? How could it be that somebody who Jesus loved, Jesus washed Judas's feet that night before he went out to do what he had to do? Jesus knew what he was going to do, and he still washed Judas's feet. He still gave him a seat of honor at the Last Supper. And I'm going to talk about that a little on Sunday, so I'm not going to give you too many spoilers on that. But Jesus loved Judas. And so how could Judas, and Judas had to know that Jesus loved him, so how could he do something like this? I don't know. How do we do the things that we do? And so that's been the thing that's really been on my mind this week is we love to throw Judas under the bus and say, this is just the worst guy, the worst villain in the history of humanity. Judas Iscariot, just the absolute worst. If we're honest with ourselves, each of us have in some way found a way to betray Jesus. We don't maybe necessarily call it betrayal. We like to give ourselves a little bit more credit. I fell short. I messed up. But there are ways in our lives that we are so willing to turn our backs on Jesus when we know that he loves us, when we know that he cares about us, when we know that he died for us, all of these things, and we still find ways to betray Jesus. Some of the things I think about that are like Judas, there's so many times where we let money be our master, where we choose money over Jesus, and we choose to do things that will help to get us forward, get us a little bit ahead, get us a little bit more in life, and we let other things take priority. And we also betray Jesus for other kinds of silver. Maybe our silver isn't money. Maybe our silver is comfort or approval. Maybe that's the kind of stuff that we'll be willing to turn our backs on Jesus for these things. Am I willing to turn my back on Jesus so that I don't rock the boat in some way? Jesus had rocked the boat for Judas, right? He had this Palm Sunday parade. Everything was awesome, and it was this really exciting thing. And I'm sure Judas thought, oh man, maybe this is a time where he's coming, and not just Judas, but the other disciples. Maybe this is a time he's coming to take back the throne of David. Instead, what does he do? He goes straight to the temple courts, and he yells at all of the religious people, and he tells them how wrong they are. And he's flipping over tables, and he's saying it's not about money. Quit trying to be making money. You're cheating people. You're stealing from them because they were in their exchange rates, and it's this whole thing, but in their exchange rates with trading in this Roman money for temple shekels, they were robbing people blind and really just doing things that were so beneath what this whole sacrificial system was supposed to be about. And Jesus comes in, and that's the thing that he's upset about. He doesn't seem to be upset about these Roman soldiers marching in the street. He's mad at the church people who were hurting others. And Judas was willing to turn a blind eye to that to get what he wanted. What he wanted was Jesus on the throne. Maybe that's part of it. And I don't know, what are we willing to turn a blind eye to have Jesus be the Jesus that we want him to be? Maybe there's other things. We love to build our own kingdoms, and we sometimes just want to take the reins, and maybe it was when Judas was trying to orchestrate how all of this would play out. Like, maybe if I just betray Jesus, all of this ball will start rolling towards getting Jesus on the throne. Sometimes we build our own kingdoms and we have an idea of what things are supposed to be, and so we set Jesus aside to do things that we think are going to build the kingdom the way they ought to be built. And it's maybe really fitting that Judas betrayed Jesus not with a slap in the face, but with a kiss. Still this image of, hey, I love you. We're good, right? And of course, I'm on your side, Rabbi, teacher. And Jesus says, this is so inauthentic. You're betraying me with a kiss? And I think that's oftentimes how we betray Jesus. It's not with a slap to the face. It's with a kiss. It's with saying, no, Jesus, I love you, but we're going to go this way. We're going to do it my way, my thing. I don't know. Maybe this is bringing something to mind for you in your life in a way that you find yourself trying to sometimes take the reins. What are the ways in which we stop letting Jesus just be Lord, and we think we need to be in charge, or we think we know what's best? And those are the times that we sometimes betray Jesus. One last little thing on Judas. This is one of the thoughts that I always have around him. Is I wish Judas would have waited. I wish he would have waited 3 days after all of this happened, because Judas is so overcome with guilt, we're told, in Matthew's gospel. Now, Luke's gospel just seems to say, no, he took the money and he went out, and he doesn't say that he gave the money back. It says that he went out and bought a field, and then he fell headlong in it and his bowels gushed out, and like, that's terrible. But it's kind of like this judgment, this divine judgment happened to him. Matthew's gospel, though, is the one that tells us that he was so overcome with remorse and guilt that he ends up taking his own life. And that may play back a little bit into the mental illness thing. But I wish Judas had waited 3 days, because I wonder what Jesus would have said to Judas if he was still alive after he rose from the dead. I wonder what Jesus would have said to him. I can't picture anything other than Jesus wrapping his arms around him and forgiving him. And I can't imagine anyone who could have been a greater apostle or a better purveyor of the grace of Jesus than Judas. Who would have been able to talk about forgiveness better than Judas? Who would have been able to talk about grace? Who would have been able to talk about mercy better than Judas could have? He could have been the absolute best of the apostles if he had waited, if he had believed that forgiveness was possible even for him. But he decided that maybe he wasn't worthy anymore. Maybe he wasn't worth that grace anymore. And so here's what I want to tell you. I know that there are times where you feel like maybe what I've done is unforgivable, that there's no way that Jesus could still love me after all that I've done. And I'm just here to tell you that his grace goes so much farther than our grace is willing to go. I mean, it's in our favorite song, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saves a wretch like me. We don't receive just a little bit of grace because we're just a little bit bad. We receive amazing grace that covers a multitude of sins, that goes so far beyond anything we could possibly imagine. I think there would have been grace for Judas. I know that there's grace for us. And so I hope that you discover that grace as you're going through this Lenten season. I hope that that's something that he reveals to you and makes real in your life. And I hope and I pray that in all of the ways that you see, oh man, I have fallen short, I've betrayed Jesus, that you understand that he just wants to wrap his arms around you and tell you that you are forgiven and that you are loved. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll try to put these out every Friday, and glad you're here for another episode of the Sermon Prep Podcast.